Welcome back, everybody. I'm still Joe Murphy, Director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy. Glad to have you with us or joining us as we continue our conference. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that we're coming to you from Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio, where we acknowledge that the lands on which we live, work, celebrate, and heal are the ancestral homelands of the Miami, Lenape, Wyandot, and Shawnee peoples, among others. The disputed Treaty of Greenville in 1795 and the forced removal of indigenous peoples from this region allowed for the founding of the college in the early 1800s. As a community, we're committed to confronting this dark past while also embracing, through education and outreach, the many indigenous communities that continue to thrive in Ohio. We're proud to bring you this morning this session on promoting successful student transitions to college STEM courses with a metacognitive skills-based peer mentoring program. With our panel, Annabel Edwards, Associate Professor of Chemistry, Ayana Hinton, Associate Professor of Biology, Chris Weingart, Associate Professor of Biology, Cristina Caldari, Associate Professor of Biology, and I think someone who I managed to leave off the list, Jenny Miller. I don't know what discipline Jenny's in.
Distinguished Program Coordinator.
Distinguished Program Coordinator, all at Denison. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Joe. So I'm going to share my screen and share my slides. Just a second. It always takes my brain just a second every time to make this happen. All right, so Joe has already introduced our topic. So I just want to, today the presenters are myself, Annabel, Cristina, and Chris. But really what we're presenting represents over 20 faculty members working over many years in the science division at Denison, trying to get at issues of the success or unequal success of certain populations in our science majors. Students of color and first generation students. And we began this work in collaboration, well, not began, but anyway, midway through this work, we worked in collaboration with Leonard Geddes from the LearnWell Projects. And so many of the tools we'll show you were actually developed in collaboration with him. And so also I want to acknowledge Jenny Miller, who's our program coordinator. Without her, really, this program wouldn't be nearly as successful as it is. So just an overview. I'm going to first introduce what this Peer Learning Strategist program is and talk about that. Also a larger initiative in that. Talk about the implementation history, what were the steps to getting this going. Then Annabel will go into how we train our peer learning strategists. Those are the ones who are doing this peer-peer mentoring. And then we'll actually have a video of a session between a peer learning strategist and the student learners that they are trying to work with. And then we'll go into how we're assessing, talk about our successes and sustaining the program. And last, we really want to address any questions you all have. So please, at any point, drop questions you have in the chat. We have Jenny looking at those, and we will get to those towards the end. But so we really would love to hear any questions you have. We also have an activity, that we're going to do a little breakout later on. So if you have a syllabus that you can pull up, it doesn't matter what syllabus, any syllabus will do. That will be good for later on. So where did we start? We started by recognizing an issue. And this was an issue of unequal success in the sciences for certain populations of students. In August of 2017, the faculty decided to do a survey, a student survey, to get a sense of how they felt about coming into the campus, how they felt they were doing, and also to get an idea of how they felt in terms of the sense of belonging. And we found, disturbingly, that about 45% fewer first generation students felt a sense of belonging than non-first generation students, and that about 60% fewer Black students and 25% fewer Hispanic students felt the sense of belonging. And a lot of that was around belonging in the classroom, belonging in the major, belonging in the division. And so we really felt that then that was affecting the other observation we made, which is retention, that students of color, first generation students, are dropping our science majors at much higher rates than other students. And those that do make it through aren't pursuing science careers post Denison at the same rate. So we really want to address this. We brainstormed a lot of different ways, and one of the ideas we came up with was this peer learning strategist program, which then became part of a larger initiative called RAISE. And so so I want to just right at the top give you our big picture takeaways. There was talk that there might be a mass exodus a little later on due to some events at Kenyon. So let's give you the top takeaways right at the beginning. One, that this metacognitive training, and that's what the PLS program does, helps students think big picture about their learning. This helps them better understand the academic process, which builds in trust, which helps them with their success. And then the other big takeaway we found is that participation as either a peer learning strategist or as a student learner working with a peer learning strategist increases engagement of these students in our science culture. And so those are giving gains in the sense of belonging. And particularly, we are targeting these programs towards students of color and first generation students through different networks. But I'll bring up that point in a little while. So those are the big picture takeaways for the program. So this PLS program falls under a larger initiative called Readiness and Inclusion in Science Education at Denison. And there's 4 goals to this initiative. First is to build student trust in our academic process. So we're using the peer learning strategists to help them trust what's going on so that they don't feel that getting a good grade or navigating the science major is a mystery, but actually they see that there's clear ways of making this happen. Also, trying to get at this as a belonging, we need to shift the culture. And part of this comes from the faculty. So we've been doing different faculty development workshops, helping us understand what we are doing in the classroom or aren't doing that's contributing to students of color and first generation students feeling less of a sense of belonging. By doing these processes, building the trust in the academic process, shifting the culture, we're hoping to help students build trust in the whole academic culture so that they feel that this is somewhere where they can survive and thrive, and not feel that it's somewhere that they don't fit in or isn't made for them. And then bigger goal is feeling a sense of belonging in the overall scientific culture. And this is talking about that beyond Denison, continuing to pursue science careers. And so we're doing that through early research experience programs and a pathway series where we have students meet with speakers who've come on campus for about an hour with food just to talk about what was the speaker's pathway. And particularly we try to target speakers who are either people of color, first generation, or in certain fields, women faculty as scientists as well. And again, all of this was funded through initial funding through the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation. So this peer learning strategist program is all about training in metacognition. So metacognition, this is a long definition for metacognition, an appreciation of what one already knows, together with a correct apprehension of the learning task and what knowledge and skills it requires, combined with the agility to make correct inferences about how to apply one's strategic knowledge to a particular situation and to do so efficiently and reliably. So it's a very long definition that has a lot of good details, but really it boils down to, well, it usually boils down, but now for some reason I can't advance my slides, thinking about one's thinking. And thinking effectively about one's thinking. So when we are teaching our peer learning strategists, what we're training them to do is to think metacognitively. We're giving them skills that help them optimize their thinking. So first, it's about differentiating thinking skills This comes from, most of us are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy of learning. So starting with remembering and going all the way to creating and executing. So helping students recognize that there's different levels of thinking skills that they are capable of. And then having them decode a particular task and understand what thinking skill is necessary. The next step in having them optimize their thinking is them being able to define for a particular assignment, exam, paper, what type of academic work do they need to do and what level of thinking skill they need to be at, and then giving them, through this training, hopefully, the ability to strategically deploy particular thinking skills at for particular academic tasks to maximize their learning. So it's all about students being able to manage all these bubbles. And some students come in, and they've got some of these skills either innately or through training. Other students struggle. But our tagline for the Peer Learning Strategist program is studying efficiently to learn effectively. So that's how we try to pull them into the program. So I've been talking a lot. I want to stop for a second. And so to do that, I'm going to ask you guys just for a moment to think about transition traps. Think about the differences in the learning environment as students come from high school to college. And actually, I want to back up. Part of when we're working, the peer learning strategists are generally juniors and seniors. The student learners are first year or sophomore students who are taking introductory level science classes. This really, we want to try to get them early on, trying to build up those metacognitive skills so that they do persist. So this transition point where they're going from high school to college is where a lot of students get caught in the trap and end up getting in trouble that first, second science class in college. So I'd like for you all to take a moment to think about, in terms of high school versus college, the average number of in-class hours per day. What's the average in high school? What's the average in college? And then the average number of tests or major graded assignments per class. Also, if you can think about the average number of chapters or content that's covered on one particular test or major assignment. And then lastly, who is responsible for the bulk of the student learning in high school versus college? So just take a couple of minutes to think about that. And then if people could enter that into the chat, or people, ooh, I'm giving away the answers, or people can speak up also, because I don't know how to see the chat. So take a couple of minutes. Right, so starting with high school, about 7 to 8 hours in class. So even with the lunch, maybe in your senior year, you're starting to cut out some classes, but a lot of time in class per day. Whereas in college, 3 to 4 hours per day. This means there's a lot of downtime. Students unfortunately see this downtime often as free time, as opposed to, no, that's time that you can use actually studying. And again, that transition trap, for those who recognize that this is a good point to study, then they're doing okay. For those who don't, then it becomes a transition trap where they're not focusing. Again, as Joan mentioned, there's a lot more assignments. So in high school, 10 to 12 per class, per course they're taking. Whereas in college, there's about 3 to 4 major assignments. This, again, is a transition problem because in high school, then there's a lot of different places to get your points, where in college, those major points are coming from just a few assignments. The number of chapters in high school is usually about one, because there's so many assignments, you're really just covering a particular concept or one chapter, where in college you may be covering 3 up to 7 in any given test. And then that last piece, and this is one of the parts that the students really really struggle with, is in high school, a lot of the learning falls on the teacher. And in college, a lot of it falls with the student. Because they're spending so much less time in the classroom, they've got to do a lot more on their own. So for metacognition in this training, what we're trying to get students to do is replace those inefficient study practices, so that they can build up metacognitive skills, so that they're not cramming with content to catch up or getting tutoring to catch up on concepts they didn't get, but they're actually managing their learning real time. And then eventually, hopefully, this transcends beyond the specific class and college years. And this is for the student learners, those working with the peer learning strategists, those in the introductory level science classes. But for the peer learning strategists, they themselves are learning as well. So they are learning all of these skills because we teach them to do these skills so they can train other students to do it. And they're also transitioning from being learners themselves to leaders. And they're getting professional development through some of the programming through the peer learning strategists, and they're growing their peer-peer network. So I'm going to try to rush through a little bit because there's a lot we got going on. So let me speed up the pace. So history of implementation. This started as a 2-year collaboration with Leonard Geddes of the LearnWell Project. In 2018, he came and we started working with our first cohort of peer learning strategists. That was 10 students from 4 different science majors. And they started initially working with the student learners. The beginning was a little rocky, but in 2019, we brought on our program coordinator, and that really helped us with the implementation. That helped us with the day-to-day interactions with setting up sessions between the learners and the peer learning strategists, and following up with the peer learning strategists on assessment, which Chris will talk about later. And since our collaboration with Leonard ended, we've continued to grow the program, recruiting new and training new PLS and new student learners. And again, this is all going back also to faculty development workshops to help shift the culture. So Leonard Geddes had a session with us about writing learning objectives that students could actually decode, that weren't, mysterious, and that they could actually understand. Becky Whaling Packer came and talked to us about how you give difficult feedback to students in a way they can receive it and not shut down. And Brian Burke came and talked to us about academic rigor, where our notions on it come from, and how can we kind of think about this in a bigger picture. So I will move on now to Annabel, who will talk about PLS training.
All right, thank you, Ayana. I'm Annabel Edwards in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview and then help you sort of walk through some of the exercises that we do with our peer learning strategists to get them ready, really using the metacognitive skills on their own so that they can then guide our student learners, our students in gateway classes through using these skills in their science courses. So as we started thinking about no longer having Leonard on site to do the training, how could we create a process that was both flexible and also captured the essence of the program, the excitement of the program that we really heard from our first set of peer learning strategists. So we recruit rising juniors to the program. These are through faculty recommendations. And also crucially, we want students that have been student learners to be PLS. So to kind of complete the loop, they're the ones who have found success, and they are often our best peer learning strategists. So as a student as a rising sophomore can also be trained as a peer learning strategist. And we've had a lot of success with that route and are continuing to be excited about that. So students are trained. We have both online modules, we meet in groups. A lot of it is discussion based, really practicing with the tools that the peer learning strategists will use with their student learners. So Jenny, our program coordinator, does a lot of the logistics around this scheduling and going through, helping students understand sort of where they need to be in the training, stepping through the different parts. And then when we meet as a group, both Jenny and faculty members involved in the program work with the students throughout the training. We also continue to do refresher sessions with our PLS each semester, talking through new ideas, also hearing their feedback, sandpaper points for them, and working through those. So as Ayana talked about, Leonard came and helped the faculty here at Denison think a lot about the way we write our learning outcomes on our syllabi for ways that our students can decode. So I've modeled that here in the learning outcomes that we have for our peer learning strategists in their training. And there's several key words that I've bolded here that are keywords that apply to some of the tools that our students use, both the peer learning strategists and as they work with their learners. And we'll pass out some of these tools in just a moment using the chat. But I really want to focus on today is how we work with our peer learning strategists so they can then work with our learners to integrate these metacognitive tools into their own work. So it is through, so in the training, the students use the the students get the background on the program. They remember how they got to be where they are as successful science students, overcoming those transition traps that Ayana discussed. And then we help them become proficient in these specific tools. And then we help them move on to higher order skills in the training where they are able to effectively work with their learners. All right, now we're ready for the next slide, Ayana. So I'm going to ask that Jenny drops 3 of the tools into the chat, and we may have a few technical difficulties, but we'll try to get those into the chat if that works. And so these are tools developed by Leonard Geddes from the LearnWell Projects, and that we give out in hard copy. There's also online versions available for our students. It's also the peer learning strategists have a workbook that they go through as part of their training, and they are key components there. So let's see, I'm going to work to just so folks have a copy of this. I'm going to put these into the chat. Hopefully, not sure why this is not working today. All right, we will get them into the chat. I don't want to I have some examples of those. The test did not work when I tried it. Okay. During the training, the PLSs work with these tools using particularly their own syllabi for the courses that they are currently taking. I'm going to move through and talk through a couple of these specific resources that we will get you handouts from once we can figure out the chat. So Ayana, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so one of the main tools that the peer learning strategists use is a version of Bloom's taxonomy. Leonard developed this in a student-friendly way that is known as the Think Well, Learn Well diagram. It really helps our students organize the way that they think about both the content and crucially also the big concepts that content backs up. And so this is, again, us helping our learning strategists use their, let's see, Ayana, we no longer can see the presentation. So this is helping.
I'm very sorry, just a second. I don't know what I did to make it all go away. I really apologize. Okay. Sorry. Can you see it yet?
Yeah, we can. Okay, and can you advance the slide? So once the students have a framework of the LearnWell Think Well diagram, the Think Well Learn Well diagram, excuse me, that Bloom's taxonomy that's allowed them to organize their those different skills and the different learning outcomes, we have a couple of tools that help them look for keywords in the syllabus that allows them then to place the faculty member expectations around the course into particular levels of learning and levels of thinking on the LearnWell Think Well diagram. And so you can see some of these key words here where we're looking down for this word integrate, and that kind of looking through where does this fit into our diagram here. And then I think actually we're going to move on to one more slide. So also helping students not only understand where those words are, but what do those words mean on a practical level. So this is another diagram from Leonard, and we can see here in this third row where we have this word integrating, the process of bringing together parts into a whole. The students are seeing all these metacognitive tools to get at the whole, which is understanding what the they're being asked for to do in a course, what concepts are important, what content works into those concepts, and how they are to use the content to really reinforce the concepts. So in addition to some of these specific charts and tools that we train our PLS in, we have specific assignments that we ask our learners to do, or that the PLS asks the learners to do, but of course that means the PLS do them first. And so that involves decoding the course outcomes, aligning their thinking with those course outcomes, and then thinking about, okay, am I actually working through in the ways that I'm using my time and my preparation and my learning for this outside of the class? Is it optimizing my thinking, really aligning with what the students, what my faculty member is asking me to do? All right, one more slide, Ayana. All right, so this is where we wanted to give folks a few minutes, and I have folks assigned into breakout rooms, and we'll work on, again, getting these resources into the chat. The format I was using earlier didn't seem to work right now. But I'm going to put the questions that you see on this slide into the chat, and I'll move folks into breakout rooms and ask that for the syllabus that you pulled up. And so we asked folks to find a syllabus at the start of the presentation. So think about one of the learning outcomes on your syllabus, and and then you can talk in your group, what thinking is required to produce this outcome. How does your students' thinking align with the thinking that you expect them to be doing? And if a student came to you sort of saying, I don't understand what this outcome means, how should I be working to fulfill it? What suggestions might you give them? All right, so I'm going to quickly open the breakout rooms. We'll get those resources figured out here and into the individual breakout rooms. So we'll do this pretty quickly, give folks a chance to think through what their learning outcomes are on their syllabus. All right, hopefully folks found that a little helpful and some intriguing questions as you look at your own syllabus. So despite our best efforts, we realized what was going on is that a setting in Zoom is not set for us to be able to share files. So if you are interested in any of the learning resources from Leonard Geddes, we are happy to share those. And if you could put your email in the chat, or if you would like to email me, I'll put my email contact information in the chat if you'd like to just email me directly. So we are going to move on now and see a dramatization, so a quick snippet of a PLS session with a PLS working with a learner. So I'll hand it over to Cristina.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cristina Caldari. I'm in the biology department. So what we would like to do now is show a video which we have titled The Receptive Learner. And this video shows how a peer learning strategist student learner interaction might go during the second peer learning session.
Hello. Hi. So nice to see you again. How are you feeling after our first session? Did you go over your class syllabi and identify the thinking skills that your professors are expecting?
Yeah, I had never read the syllabus before. I was surprised how useful it was.
Great. Now let's look at the Think Well, Learn Well diagram again. As you'll remember, these are different levels of thinking skills. At the top are lower level thinking skills, which correspond to lower outcomes. As you go further down this chart, you'll reach higher order thinking skills, which correlate to higher outcomes. Does this chart still make sense to you?
Yeah, I never knew there were so many different levels of learning.
Yeah, it can be really helpful when studying to know what level of thinking you're working towards. Because if your exams are going to target higher levels of thinking and you're studying at lower levels, you won't achieve the results that you hope for. Let's practice identifying thinking skills by looking at your syllabus for your biology class and the course learning outcomes.
Okay.
So here it says, distinguish the similarities and differences in the mechanisms of information flow, cell structure and function, cell division, and energy flow in prokaryote and eukaryotic cells.
Okay. Would that be the applying level?
Not quite. So with this one, it would actually be the analyzing level,
Okay.
which you can get by correlating that to the verb distinguish. So you'd need to use the analyzing level, which is a little higher than the applying level.
Okay.
So if it just said name the stages of cell division, what would that be?
Remembering.
Yep. All right, so today's session focuses on the use of academic SMART goals, which is a tool to guide your study sessions and achieve your desired outcomes by linking them to the course learning goals. Are you familiar with these?
No, I've never heard of them before.
Okay, so here's the formula for writing academic SMART goals. And this is the rubric for determining how strong your SMART goals are. Let's work through an example with your calculus class.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the first step is to identify the overarching concept. Looking at the course learning outcomes on your syllabus, it says here solve integration problems using basic techniques of integration, including integration by parts and partial fractions. So what would you say the main concept is here?
Integration.
Perfect. The next step is to identify the cognitive skill that is being asked for in this outcome.
Would that be solve?
Yep. And looking at our outcome decoder tool, what level of thinking does this correspond to?
Applying.
Yep, exactly. So now we're going to get a little more specific and determine the more specific content that we will need to achieve this outcome.
The content is integration problems using techniques of integration by parts and partial fractions.
Yep. So see how taking that line from the syllabus, we're able to decode it to help us understand what you'll need to study?
Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to put it all together to create an academic SMART goal.
Okay.
So looking at this worksheet from your professor, I can see that she's given you a bunch of practice problems. So why don't we use these to create an academic SMART goal?
Okay. So since my exam is in 3 weeks, for the date part, I want to do a frequency rate of every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And for the measurement, I want to work through 3 practice problems in each study session.
Sounds great. So now we have the overarching concept, the required thinking skill, an outcome, the desired amount of problems for each session, and a frequency of study sessions. So do you see how all these parts are going to guide you to prepare for the exam of integration?
Yeah, I really like how structured this will make my study session because sometimes I have no clue where to start.
Yeah, I'm glad this is helpful. So I would encourage you to make academic SMART goals for all your classes. And as you study the material, these should guide your study sessions and make them more effective. So this is all we have for today, and I'll see you next week for our 3rd session.
Okay, thank you. See you next week.
You're welcome.
Okay, so this video featured Erin Kistler, who is a biology major, and Adriana Muniz, who's also a biology major. And Erin has worked as a peer learning strategist, and Adriana was a former learner who has now transitioned to a peer learning strategist, and they created this video using their own experiences in these positions. So this second session, which as you can see is highlighted or bolded in the middle of this flow right here on the right, would happen obviously after the first PLS learner session. During that first PLS learner session, students would use tools like the Think Well, Learn Well diagram, and then move on to more complex tools like the academic SMART goals, which were introduced in this second session. Then there would be a 3rd session where the complexity increases. We have other tools like the academic product production process workstation framework, which you will see later. And then if necessary, students can also sign up for a 4th session with their PLS. What I would like to do now is open the floor for questions for Lilly Riddick and Nick Olitas, who are both biology majors. They have also had experiences, one as a peer learning strategist and one as a student learner. And so I will ask them to say hello, introduce themselves very quickly, and answer the question, what metacognitive tool do you find was the most useful in your science classes? Lilly and Nick.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? I'm Nick. I'm a sophomore, rising junior, and I'm a biology major. I think the metacognitive tool that helped me the most, really the most effective thing for me in my learning was to plan things in advance. Say if you saw in the video, realizing when your exams are, when due dates are, and planning actual times in your schedule to sit down and review material or go over class notes or prepare for the next class. That really helped me quite a bit because it gave me good structure and it gave me clear goals without feeling too overwhelming.
Thanks, Nick.
My name is Lilly Riddick, and I'm a senior biology major here at Denison. Something that I found particularly useful of the things that I learned, like how to encourage students to do as a peer learning strategist, was to basically discern like which like level of thinking that a student is at, judging by like their notes and just the way that they're interacting with course material in general. And I found that particularly useful, like personally, when I found out about this, because doing so allows you to see like where you are in your course relative to your like course objectives outlined in your syllabus. And then you can, with that information, you can strategize like how to interact more deeply with the course material.
Excellent. Thank you, Lily. So since we're running a little short on time, if there are any pressing questions that anybody wants to ask, maybe we'll field 1 or 2 questions at the most. And if not, we will let these two get back to their summer research. So I believe there might not be any questions. So thank you, Lily and Nick, for joining us. And unless anybody from Denison needs to add anything else, I think we should continue.
Good. Just a second. There we go.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris from the Department of Biology. I'm just going to briefly talk about the different types of assessment that we do in the PLS program. Again, there are 3 types. The first one is a post-session evaluation that the strategist completes after meeting with the learner. The second one is an end of semester assessment where we gain qualitative feedback about their experiences. And the third one is a survey that we do for first-year science students that measures their sense of belonging and persistence. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on each one of those. And so for the first one, it involves a process, and Ayana, can you advance a couple of times, I think? Yeah. So this involves something called the academic product production process. And you can think of this as an academic production line for students learning. And the idea is that we want students to be able to manage all these stations very effectively. And if they can do that, then they are going to be able to master their learning. As you can see that there are 7 stations. There is attending class, studying, taking notes, writing, reading, attending the lab, and then overseeing is the holistic view of the student's learning process. And if you look at those a little bit more carefully, you'll see that there are specific skills with each lab station. What happens is that a strategist, after meeting with their learner, will observe the student, ask questions, have a conversation, and be able to diagnose which station or stations the troubles or the student is struggling with. And so they can look at if there are problems with connections, does the student read the textbook, read the syllabus, and so on. And I don't think we're going to have time for this, but something you can think about is where do your students struggle? What stations are hardest for your students? Or maybe they ignore some of those stations. Okay, what we have found, and we're looking at a semester's worth of data here, and it's a Likert scale to 5 points. And we find that with students after their first session with their strategist, they struggle with all those stations. And then by the last station, which is in green, we see that there is improvement in their learning. So again, we see that the program is improving the students' ability to learn, and they've been working on those stations. The second type of assessment we do is end of the semester, and it's really to get some qualitative feedback about the impressions from the strategists as well as the learners. And so as Ayana said, that the strategists are benefiting from this program, and so we want to get those impressions, and those are some of the questions that we ask. We also ask for feedback from the learner to see if they are actually using these strategies in their learning. And then the third type is a survey that we administer for first-year science students. We do it at weeks 2 and weeks 14, and it's anonymous. And basically, we're trying to understand the attitudes towards their science classes, towards their professor, and towards their peers. Ultimately, what we want to do with this data is compare changes between weeks 2 and weeks 14, as well as compare the PLS program target group to those students that completed the PLS program. And that's our assessment.
Right, so I'm going to quickly go through, the successes we've had thus far. We've trained 39 peer learning strategists, 49 and they've worked with 49 different student learners. Again, our target here was about the sense of belonging overall of first generation students in the sciences. So about 72% of the PLS have been students of color or international students who also struggle with the transition. And about 68% of the student learners have been students of color or international students. We don't have that much data on how many first generation students yet. That will come in further assessment. We've also had 9 former student learners go on to be PLS. So again, this pipeline of trying to help these students feel like they're part of the culture. Our faculty development workshops have helped the faculty who've participated move to having clearer and more detailed language in their syllabi, lead to thinking about strategies for navigating, giving difficult feedback, and thinking about their ideas of academic rigor and how those play into supporting non-traditional or traditionally underrepresented students in the sciences. And one other thing that we've had is overcoming challenges with data gathering. Early on, we had to figure out what kind of questions do we want to ask? How often do we want to survey? Who do we want to survey? So we now feel we have a pretty good way of getting that data. So, Christine?
Some of the areas that we are trying to grow include recruiting learners themselves, which is sometimes difficult because there is a culture of overcommitment in the student population at Denison, and so they feel like they have overly full student schedules. Also, they see sometimes some stigma around the idea of seeking help, which is related to issues of imposter syndrome, which is not something that only affects faculty. Additionally, a lot of students have difficulty understanding how they are going to be gaining immediate effects from this program because they see it as, or they believe it to be somewhat of a tutoring program. So it's difficult for them to understand that it's actually metacognitive training that is going to give them longer term effects that can also be applied to other areas of study beyond the science curriculum. As we just mentioned earlier, so collecting data has been an area that we're also trying to grow. We have a lot of data that has been collected, but we still have not performed the data analysis on it. Can we go to the next slide? And so in order to explain a little bit how this learner recruitment happens, I think that I should bring up that in addition to having our wonderful PLS program coordinator who basically runs the show when it comes to coordinating the PLS program. The faculty members, as you can see from the screen, are spread out throughout the science division. So we have faculty in chemistry, in earth and environmental sciences, and biology, so that the recruitment of the peer learning strategist, as well as the learners, is spread out through the entirety of the science division so that we can target a larger student population. So we have collaborations both on campus with other groups, as well as through our STEM grant, which Denison just received as a recent grant from the NSF that is targeted to aiding low-income STEM students, where a cohort of 8 incoming students are identified. They become part of this larger RAISE program and receive benefits such as research mentoring with early research experiences, usually lasting around 5 weeks. They get career mentoring, they get academic mentoring, and then they are funneled into the PLS program for peer-to-peer mentoring. And sometimes this will lead to the learners then becoming part of the program as strategists themselves. So some of the other on-campus collaborations include student groups like our BLAST group, which is Black, Latin, X, Asian STEM Society, with the First Gen Network, and then also across campus with the Center for Teaching and Learning, and then with Women and Gender Studies, with the Knowlton Center for Career Exploration, and then we also have Pathway Series. And these are only some of the examples of the other collaborations that we have across campus.
So we really want to thank you. Sorry, we're rushing through at the end, but we want to thank you all for listening to us talk about this Peer Learning Strategist program. We've really enjoyed working with, collaborating and growing the program, and we look forward to growing it further as we continue. And as we, get data and assess the program and really see if it's achieving the purpose that we want it to achieve. I want to reiterate, if anyone has any questions, we're sorry we're a little short on time. If anybody has any pressing question, you can certainly drop it in the chat and we'll try to address it. Also, I saw several emails from people who said they wanted the resources. So if you want the resources, please drop your email in the chat and let us know so that we can send those directly to you. But yeah, we really, really appreciate your attention. Thank you so much.